This podcast is brought to you by the 100 Club of Arizona, a nonprofit organization that supports public safety. And we are excited to bring these stories to you because many people want to hear them. And we think it's important that you have a glimpse inside the day-to-day activities that our law enforcement officers and firefighters face on a regular basis. Welcome to the Call Podcast. Today we're here with Brandon Sheffert, who is currently working with Peoria Police Department. But I know he didn't start there, so Brandon, can you tell me a little bit about what brought you to your current position?
Well, I started back in Minnesota in 2004. I worked for the Edina Police Department in Minnesota for about 6.5 years. Then it started 2010, end of 2009, moved out here, got hired with the Peoria Police Department, was on the road there. Was a field training officer and was on our SWAT team. Currently, I serve as our media relations officer and kind of our public relations type officer, so I do a little bit of everything.
I want to go back to Edina. So working in the cold, the issues are so different between the weather situation in Minnesota and what we have here in the desert.
Yeah, the one thing I always tell people that they don't understand who've grown up out here is that you can never get comfortable in the winter. You know, you go to work wearing long underwear, 14 jackets, hat, gloves, all sorts of things. So you're nice and toasty. You get in the car, you get warm, you go outside, you're sweating, so now your sweat freezes, so you get really uncomfortable. Then you get back in the car to thaw out, and it's just a never-ending cycle, and 10, 12-hour shifts of that is pretty miserable. I remember there were times we used to work kind of the highways in the metro area where we were, and make traffic stops, you get out, and all of a sudden you slip and fall on the ice on the highways. And I remember several times where I just walk back to my car, get in and drive away because I didn't even want to deal with it. So yeah, it's very different. It's nice out here. When people complain about the heat, I'm like, you don't know what the difference is. So, but yeah, it's been a good change.
You encounter a lot of different things in your line of work, and I want to hear about something special that has happened to your family.
I was training a new officer in this area where these apartments aren't necessarily the best area of our city. This kid's sprinting down the road, and we're like, that's a little weird. So we go stop him, and we ask him what he's doing, and he's like, I'm just out for a run, kind of being a smart something. But
Alec.
Yeah. So he was about 14 or 15 years old, and his name is Anthony. The person I'm training asked him, like, what do you want to do when you're older? And he's like, I want to go in the military. If that doesn't work out, I want to do something that I'm not going to say. But so that kind of was the end of it. And then about a month and a half later, when I was by myself, we get a call back to this apartment complex, and there was a kind of a family fight. And him and his sister were kind of getting into it. And I pulled him aside, and I wasn't getting through to this kid at all. Something about it was very bothersome to me because you just could tell there was like nothing there. Talking to like a brick wall basically. And I went to the mom and said, like, you know, what's his deal? He's always been mad. And I'm like, okay. And so I told the mom, I said, you know, I'm going to come back and check up on him and make sure that he's following the rules and doing everything right. There was no crime at that night, so we didn't do anything. We left him to kind of calm down. So then I kept my word, came back, I don't remember, a few days later. And from that point forward, he said this, he felt like somebody actually really cared about him, just by that little action of actually following through with the word that they said. And what happened then was the neighbor kind of approached me, one of the neighbors to him and his family, and kind of gave me the rundown about how there were 7 people living in a 1.5 bedroom apartment. It's just constant different substances going on inside that residence. So I kept stopping by more and more. I would just go do my paperwork sitting over there, but got to a point where I guess he would sit and kind of wait after school to see if I was going to stop by, and if I didn't stop by, he would be all bummed out, and he started referring to everyone in the complex as my cop's going to stop by, or this. So
you have your own personal law enforcement officer.
It was kind of funny, yeah. So we meet up and just, you know, check in and see how things were going. And I started to learn a lot more about the backstory, the history of the family, and kind of what was really going on. The neighbor kept pressuring me. They're like, hey, you really should do like a Big Brothers thing with him. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. Liability stuff. It's just, we have to be careful in our line of work, all this stuff. So I'm like, I'm not going to do it. And then they kept pushing it. And he started asking if we could do something like that. I said, I'm not going to just do it. I said, if there's an organization we can find that actually does something like that, we'll do it. So I called around Big Brothers, he was too old. There was a couple others that he was too old for, but the YMCA had a program called the Reach and Rise Mentoring Program. I don't know if it exists anymore, but, you know, we took it very slow because obviously I'm a police officer, so very paranoid about things like that. So things started slowly once a week. not even once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, we'd meet up. And once I got to really know him and understand, there were things like the very first time we hung out, I said, hey, do you want to go get something to eat? And I said, where do you want to go? And he said, McDonald's. And I said, come on. I was like, I'm not going to take you to McDonald's when like I can take you somewhere else. And I go, do you want to go somewhere nicer? And he's like, well, I don't know where. And I said, well, like, do you want to go to like Applebee's or something? And his response was, well, what's that? Wow. So that kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And then when we went there, he didn't really even understand how to order off of a menu. I was like, wow, my kids are so young, and this kid is, 14 or 15 and doesn't have the experience or ability to do things that my kids know how to do. Mm-hmm. So that kind of kept going, and I enjoyed spending time with him, obviously, because he was always happy, and it was nice to get him away. He started doing better in school. Ever since I met him, his grades started to go up every semester, except for the last one, but that's another discussion.
Par for the course.
And then it kind of the turning point, there were a couple of things. There was a new boyfriend in the picture, and things kind of started to escalate to a point where it started to get kind of unsafe for him. There was one night I remember getting a call, I got a call from him in tears, just saying that something had happened with the boyfriend. And
this is mom's new boyfriend?
Yeah.
Okay.
So something had happened with the boyfriend and him, and he took off to grandma's house. And then a couple weeks later, him and mom kept getting into it. Mom, again, had substance abuse issues. And she calls me one day and says, hey, I need you to come over here. And so I go over there, and in front of him, standing right there, she's like, I can't do it anymore. I don't want him. Take him away from me. I can't have him. And I said, well, I work till midnight. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with I don't know. Grandma had actually moved away, so grandma was no longer around. So I called my wife and said, hey, Anthony, his mom basically said she doesn't want him anymore. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know what to do. What do you think? And we kind of both were very hesitant, obviously. But I was kind of like, we've had a relationship not just with him, but the mom. She understood it. And I was very clear to get it written in writing that it was what happened and all that. So anyways, he came down for 2 days, I believe, and then mom called and apologized and said, I was wrong, which we knew would happen. So he went back, things got better for a while. Basically, we helped keep things afloat. I wanted him to stay with his family because I thought that was important, to stay where he was going to school. And then they kept moving all over the place. We bought him a phone. That way, if anything happened, he could get a hold of us. Except for they kept trying to take it away because they didn't want him to be able to let me know what was going on. Right?
Sure.
So things kind of kept going. Then at one point, the decision kind of was things were getting too crazy with the live-in boyfriend, and he wasn't doing well. So grandma ended up moving closer to his school. So we had him go with grandma for a little bit. He lived there with her for about a year, and then out of nowhere, she told him, I'm moving and you have to figure something out. So then he called his mom, obviously, and she didn't have a place for him to go because she didn't have a place for her to be at the time. And at that point, he calls and asks if he could come live with us. And again, my wife and I talked about it, and my wife, being the generous person she is, was like, well, we can't let him live on the street. Bring him in. So about a year ago now, he moved in with us, and it's been challenging, but a pretty amazing experience too. It's going to be weird. He's actually leaving here in about a month and a half to go to the Navy. So,
wow,
it's been good. He's really acclimated, become a part of the family. So I have a 10-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, and obviously the boys have really bonded. But my kids absolutely adore him. It's very fun to be able to give him the experiences that he didn't have growing up. Just even holidays. Birthdays, things like that weren't ever celebrated. I think he's realizing kind of how it should be.
And to be able to go from only knowing something fast food like McDonald's to the Navy.
Right.
Obviously, you've had a huge influence on this teenager.
I think he would have defeated the odds anyway. I believe that, but I think it was just right place, right time, and we were able to give him that opportunity to really succeed. Even just his maturity, and it wasn't just me. The school helped a ton, Peoria High School. The people there were absolutely amazing, helping once they understood kind of what was going on, because he never would tell anyone.
Sure.
He never would share any of it. But going from wearing the same clothes every other day to having clothes and having that sense of being worth something, and he had a job, he's working like crazy. So Obviously, it's something that's never going to, nothing will top it in my career. And with my current job, there's a reporter who I'm friends with on my personal Facebook, and finally started asking, who's this other kid that just popped in your family pictures? And I said, well, I don't want to talk about it. So for a year I said I didn't want to do anything. And then finally we talked about how if it gets other people to get involved, which was supposed to be how it was supposed to be reported, but it wasn't, that we would do it. And he wanted to do it because, again, he wanted to give kids hope. So.
That's pretty incredible. So you talk about getting people involved. What would you like to see come from?
I think it's just pay attention to what kids are doing. I think there's a lot of mentoring organizations. Big Brothers Big Sisters is great. All these other things that you can do. We have such busy lives. Take a little bit of time out of your day to help somebody who has such small things are so amazing to them. Mm-hmm. I mean, little, an hour here, an hour there can mean the world to a kid. And I think if we had more people who were willing to take on that challenge, I think we'd have less problems. But
I couldn't agree more. Well, I'm sure when you started your career in law enforcement, you never expected this to be the result or this to be the thing that probably impacted you the most. How many years do you have left working, per se?
Well, in Arizona, I still have, I think, 12 left.
Years.
So it's funny, people will joke, oh, are you going to go pick up another kid off the street? And it's like, it kind of, I feel like, and the way I like to say it to everybody is I think anybody in the exact same situation, understood the same circumstances, police officer or not, I would hope and, pray that they would do the same thing. I mean, to be moved by a story like this and to know that this kid, had never been in any trouble. I mean, by all statistical studies, he should be in jail and going to prison here shortly. Mm-hmm. I mean, with what he was raised like.
But instead he's going to the Navy.
Right.
Pretty incredible.
Yep.
Very incredible. Well, we think it's very honorable what you've done, and I know that everybody or anybody in your situation would do something similar, but we want to recognize how amazing that is, and to have influence on the future generation, there's just nothing better than that.
Well, and one of the things he's really said, which really makes me realize it was worth it, is once he's out of the Navy, he keeps talking about how he wants to be a police officer or a teacher because he wants to be able to go take what he's gotten and give it back.
The ultimate compliment.
Yeah.
The ultimate thank you.
We always like to take something away from every story that is told, and today I believe that takeaway is simply just be kind.
I'm a big believer in just treating people the way, being human, being normal. There's a time to be the authoritative figure, but there's also time just to be normal. And sometimes I joke around too much, and sometimes people take that the wrong way. But I think if we're human with people, understand what they're going through, it really helps us to do our job better. I think we're more successful. I had a lot of great mentors growing up back in Minnesota, and I've always kind of wanted to give back from what people have given me. So that's something I took out onto the street. I felt like I was pretty good at talking to teenagers or younger kids even, trying to get through to them. And so sometimes that kind of gets to a point where, I can't, and that really frustrates me. But that was kind of what I've learned out here. I've really kind of developed that part of my career and wanting to really make a difference. And, anyone can go out and write tickets and take police reports, but it's the men and women who are out there daily. And it's everybody. It's every officer out there who makes a difference, and we just don't hear about it.
That's so true. So you're saying you enjoy talking to challenging youth. I have an 11-year-old son. If you come over,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Thank you so much for your time today, and if you were impacted by this story, we would sure hope that you would subscribe to our podcast. And even more so, if you could write a review, that really helps us be seen on iTunes and other avenues, and we want to make sure that these stories get out to the masses. We think it's important. Also, be sure to check out thecallpod.com because you can see associated videos or links and stories, pictures associated with these individuals, which is pretty neat. So continue to pay it forward. Thank you for your time today, and be sure to check back in and download our next episode. Until then, be safe.